On behalf of Sardar Patel Institute of Economic and Social Research, Ahmedabad, I welcome you all in our Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav lecture series. In today's webinar, we would focus on women entrepreneurs whose importance is recognized for reducing gender gaps in workforce, economic empowerment of women, and promoting inclusive and sustainable economic growth. Women's economic participation has significant ripple effects for development as they spend more of their income for families' well-being, as well as significant spillover effects in empowering other women in family and wider community. However, women-led enterprises comprise a small proportion of India's enterprise ecosystem and are often engaged in the informal MSME segment with little potential for growth. Due to the existence of differential social and cultural norms, which are largely against women, including fewer inheritance rights and poor access to finance, women face many challenges in their journey as an entrepreneur. Now, the concern is for promoting women entrepreneurship and the extent to which collective approach could be beneficial. To shed light on this issue, we are happy to have Professor H.S. Shylendra from Institute of Rural Management, Anand. Professor Shylendra holds a PhD in economics and his areas of research interest include development theories, rural development, gender, local governance, cooperatives, and microfinance. He has nearly 28 years of experience combining research, teaching, training, and academic administration. Recently, he has been part of impact evaluation studies on NRLM, Narmada Canal Irrigation, and training impact of NIRD. He is also a member of Center for Sustainable Livelihood at IRMA. He has participated in several research and consulting assignments for central and state governments, donor and other agencies. Dr. Shylendra was chairman of the Standing Working Group on Local Institutions of the Chhattisgarh Planning Commission, a member of the Expert Committee of RBI on Credit Cooperatives, member of Taskforce on credit-related issues of farmers, Ministry of Agriculture, and member of Working Group of Insolvency Board of India. He was awarded Dr. S.R. Sain Prize by Indian Society of Agricultural Economics for Best Book on Agricultural Economics and Rural Development for his work, Diversification and Sustainable Rural Livelihood in 2012. He was a visiting lecturer at PG course on developing countries of Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Zurich during 1999. He has published a few books, monographs, and articles in reputed journals and magazines. Recently, he has designed and offering an elective course on COVID-19 pandemic, governance and management, and also pursuing a longitudinal study over 2 villages in Gujarat, focusing on changes in livelihoods and occupational structure. Professor Shylendra, we are happy to have you in our ACAM lecture series. To moderate this program, we have with us Professor Niti Mehta, Director, Sardar Patel Institute of Economic and Social Research. Professor Mehta has
I think take over from here, Hansa.
There are 2 lines. She has a long years of experience in rural and agriculture economic. She has done many studies on central and state governments and also published many books and research papers. Now, ma'am, please, you may proceed.
Yeah, actually, I thought that welcome Professor Shylendra and all the participants. It's indeed a pleasure to invite you for this lecture series to Sardar Patel Institute. And I think the topic is of interest to all of us who are working on development economics as well as employment and labor markets. So I think what I was thinking was that we can proceed with the lecture. And then once you end the lecture, I will just try to sum up and give my own comments if I have any, and then we will have an open house.
Okay.
So I think I would now invite Professor Shylendra that you can proceed with and go ahead with your lecture, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mehta. I'm also thankful to Dr. Forum Dave for her effort in mobilizing me for this seminar, and also to Professor Ansa Jain for her elaborate introduction. Right, because I would say when Dr. Dave approached me, then because I was Yeah, I was busy and I was initially not able to respond. Then subsequently we worked out. And then she also gave me a clue, possibly on what I could talk, women's empowerment and entrepreneurship like that. So then coming from Anand, I thought I will add cooperatives and collectives also to it, to already a difficult challenge or a topic, right? Yeah, so that's how now I have ended up with this theme of women entrepreneurship development, collectives as the way forward, right? So therefore, one caveat, whether Dr. Dave would agree or not, right? If seminar goes well, so give me the credit, and if there is any problem, so blame her. That's the caveat.
Yes, sir.
From
You don't have to worry on that count.
from my side, one-sided caveat, whether she agrees or not. Okay. Anyway, so good or bad, we should be debating these kinds of issues. I'm really thankful for this opportunity, right? And especially this is an opportunity for me to engage with a group of social scientists, right? Sada Patel Institution. I know it is an institution which had a very good, past a kind of a record as a social science research institution. It had many illustrious economists and researchers, right? Yeah, so I know the kind of legacy. So therefore, I'm very much looking forward to this engagement, and more than possibly sharing anything from my side, I would probably would like to know the kind of comments and kind of any kind of thoughts from the side of the audience. So that is my expectation, more than giving anything from my end. But I will try and see, having agreed and having given the topic, I will try and see how best I can do justice to this area. Right. Of course, to make it simple, right? Of course, things are complex, as we all understand. But I'm also a teacher. That is my primary role. So for the students, we try and make things simplified, right? So here also I have, in some way, tried to follow that approach. So I will be sharing my thoughts on three broad aspects. One, of course, the whole issue of women's work participation, and also the status of employment and entrepreneurship linked to that, right? And then the second one, of course, yeah, so there are variety of interventions, right, for employment generation and entrepreneurship promotion, right? So how are they working, right? So what kind of insights that we can gather, right? And then moving forward, right, in terms of pursuing this issue of employment generation and entrepreneurship development, particularly among women, right? So what are the various possibilities, and more so, right? What role collectives can play, right? So because of course I come from Anand, I am here, I have observed the working of Amul Dairy, right, which all of us know, right? Not only based on Amul's experience, but also my own studies and understanding with regard to collectives. So I see some potential, some role for collectives in terms of addressing this issue of women's work participation and also entrepreneurship development. Yeah. So therefore, and I will conclude with my whatever final implications. Yeah. So this is broadly the scheme of things. Yeah. So let me straight away go into the topic, right? Yeah. So of course we are celebrating 75 years of our independence. So we are taking stock of how far we have come in different areas, right? And there are achievements on various fronts, and there are also challenges. So even in the area of women's empowerment, there are many achievements, but there are also many challenges, right? And of course, when it comes to the issue of women's empowerment, right? So we all know there are many definitions, many indices, many indicators, etc. Right? But at the core, what is important or what needs to be emphasized is establishing the balance between the genders, right? So that is how possibly in a simplified way women's empowerment can be taken in all domains, in the domains of social domain, in the economic domain, in political domain. So it's one of a balancing act, right? How do we balance the different roles and different powers and resources of the different genders, right? And of course, economic domain is also a very key domain. It plays an important role. In fact, it can influence other two domains also, right? When we say economic domain, of course, it includes areas like employment generation, asset distribution, entrepreneurship development, income generation. So like that, so there are various areas, and each itself is a challenge. Each area itself is a challenge. But of course, ideally, yes, as economists, so we know that, right? So one of the ways by which balance can be established is by way of redistribution of assets and income, right? Like we have attempted at various levels, like including land reforms, right? Even the land question for women also is also there, right? Right, but that is not easy, right? The redistribution of any kind, right, is not easy. So there are bound to be resistance, and as we have seen that has happened, right? So therefore, the other way, alternative way of again improving the position is through issues like employment generation and entrepreneurship development. Maybe that is easier than the other approaches. So therefore, these are more popular. Of course, employment per se is also important. I am not saying. So relatively, right, when it comes to issue of redistribution of assets and income, employment generation and such kind of interventions become relatively easier. So therefore, they have assumed the importance. Recently skilled employment along with the unskilled wage employment that we have been trying to create, both for male and female, right? Because in both the categories of employment, right? So if you see the somewhat the recent trends in last say couple of decades, right? So there is a lot of emphasis on women, right? So like for example, NRLM, right? Our flagship program. So 100% supposed to be a women. MG Narega says, yeah, 33% of the employment should be for women, though actually nearly 60% of the workers are women, right? And DDU-GKY, right? A kind of a new program, skill-based program. There also there is a prescription, 33% women have to be there, right? So these are all, so they aimed at therefore creating this balance in terms of employment, right? And also there is another dimension that probably bringing in women would also bring more efficacy into the system or into these programs, right? So that one argument is there. Women also become instrument, right? This is supposed to be empowering, but they become instruments towards ensuring program success, right? Right. So that is the kind of policy framework in terms of employment generation that we see, right? But what is the impact of that on say employment or work participation, right? Particularly of women. So if these programs, if they are making good impact, right, working effectively, so that should get reflected in the additional employment generation. So therefore, increased work participation by women, right? But as we all know that it's a paradoxical situation, both in rural and urban areas, and more so in urban areas, right? So as per the trends, what we right, the extent of work, right, by men, right? There is a big gap, and also the gap is widening, right? So this is the paradox as economy has been growing. So this is in the rural areas and no different in urban areas, but urban areas the gap is even much wider, right? So that is again another paradox, right? So one expects the reverse in the urban areas, but some of the inherent challenges, inherent contradictions, right, structurally and otherwise, seem to be more stronger in urban than in rural, as per this, right? As per this, right? But overall, the low work participation is the matter of concern, right? And if you also look at the nature of, because these are all official statistics I am sharing, right? Though subsequently I will be sharing my own data, right, with regard to NRLM particularly, right? So this is the type of the status of employment. Yeah, so this is in general also is a matter of concern for women, right? So of course, self-employment is the major category, and regular kind of jobs, right? So which are now very, very limited, right? So that is also reflected, and especially for women. So even if it is about 1/5 of women, there is work participation, right? Only 10% of them are having any kind of regular jobs, right? So they therefore tend to depend more on self-employment and also casual employment, which is much higher for the women. So that is also indicating to the precarity of the employment situation for the women. So we need to take note of, right? Yeah. So therefore, if the programs were to make positive impact, right? Of course, possibly self-employment, which is there at certain level, which is now which has the highest share, probably that also would increase at the cost of possibly casual employment, and regular job also, if skill-based and other kind of employment measures work well, that also should increase. But yeah, so this is the status which is satisfactory, right? Yeah, so what are the reasons why this kind of imbalance, this kind of a gap, right? Because it's not that for men also it is things are hunky-dory. No, even for men, absolutely. So therefore, the status of employment is not, it's not satisfactory, right? And for women, therefore, relatively it is even worse, right? Yeah, so if you therefore look at the literature as to why this kind of gap or difference that is there, right? Various reasons are identified. Of course, particularly, so now we are seeing the male-female difference. So the gender issue comes up in a major way, right? So we know there are a variety of discriminations that are prevalent, right? Both in the family and also in the market, right? Employment, of course, takes place in the market, right? So variety of ways there are restrictions and constraints that come in the way of women participating in a full-fledged way, right? Of course, in certain families, there is reluctance also to send women for work. That is there, even particularly among even the upper caste sections, and to lack of decent and safe jobs, right? So in variety of ways, so therefore discussion come. Of course, market also discriminates, right? So market, right, very explicitly, right, nations out women for variety of jobs, because women are considered suitable, not helpful, right? So therefore, gender discrimination, which is there, so is also working in varied ways to deny women decent employment opportunities, right? And at the same time, right, so formal employment particularly would require better education, but education achievements are lower in general, more so in rural areas. Skill development is also a problematic thing, though we have been attempting, as per the official statistics also, in rural areas, less than 1% of the women are having any kind of a skill, formal training, right? And some scholars also have been arguing that these days, so therefore there is some kind of a trade-off that is taking place, and hence that decline in the work participation rate, right? So maybe these arguments are there. One may have to trying to look at this, if not in this research, in my longitudinal study, such aspect also I'm looking at, right? Did increased enrollment lead to, right, lead to lower work participation by women, right? And then, of course, the macro challenges, right? So one of the macro challenges, both for men and women, is the issue of low growth of jobs, right? So in a sense, post-reforms is characterized as a period of jobless growth, right? And particularly for the women, right? So at least one period for which I had some data, the growth rate of employment for women has been negative, right? So jobless growth, even if it is at least no, neutral is okay, but it is negative, right? Even the existing, and I also attribute, right, as to why this is declining and not improving, right, despite several efforts, policy effort. I see problems also in the programs that are being implemented, right? So all these women-focused programs, and particularly employment generation programs, right? Right, due to systemic and programmatic reasons, right? There are system level challenges and also program level challenges, and they are also constraining in improving the employment situation, right, for women, right? So that's what I'm going to now focus upon before I come to my argument of how possibly collectives could help promoting more decent jobs for women, right? Both, of course, jobs, I mean, even in the sense of entrepreneurship development. Of course, entrepreneurship development here, I mean, not that high-end entrepreneurship development. I am talking in terms of entrepreneurship among the poor, low-income class or women, right? So it is a micro entrepreneurship largely I am talking of, right? Yeah. So therefore we need to understand, right, these schemes. So that is my attempt in terms of studies also, including, of course, NRLM, from which I'm going to draw a lot of results and data, right? Yeah. So what are the challenges with these programs? So why are they not, right? Despite so much of focus, right, on women that we are seeing, so why are they not showing the results? Why it is not reflected in this work participation rate, right? Even in the self-employment category, right? Yeah. So diverse schemes exist, as I mentioned, and they also have high level of mobilization, right? Like, of course, NRLM, right, has mobilized 80 million. Of course, it also has even bigger goal, right? As of now, possibly it has mobilized 80 million women, 8 crore women, right? And but as I said, despite their scale and outreach, so they're working, right, is that leaves a lot to be desired in terms of impact as to what is happening, right? So as I have identified, so in my study, the paper that I'm also going to share, right, two broad kind of reasons. One is, of course, the systemic reason. At the system level, there are challenges for these schemes and intervention to work effectively. And at the level of the program, right? As a program, when we implement, they have their own kind of design, they have their own kind of a structure. But even in the program, so they face a lot of constraint, despite many improvements that have taken place in the recent years, right? Broadly, we all know that many of these programs they are reformist and incremental in terms of their impact, right? So their approach, right, is largely of that nature, right? So including, of course, the limited allocation, right? Limited allocation, so which has become also a problem in the recent years in the post reforms period, right? So and that's not going to help, right? So they leave on year-to-year allocation, right? And that allocation also varies considerably, right? So it's not therefore a kind of a systematic effort that can be done, right? So given their dependence on annual budgets, right? And moreover, as I said, that they are reformist, so they try their in their own way, right? But they end up with, at the most, some incremental results, as I'm going to show. So that is the larger constraint for this program, right? And of course, not only for their budget, but also for their working. So they are dependent on, like particularly NRLM, right? Dependent on market and state discretion, right? So the vagaries of market, vagaries of state functioning come into play, right? right? So market intervention, I mean a market sort of role, I mean vagaries of market, I mean, like for example, NRLM, right? Though it has multiple objectives, right? Self-employment generation, micro-entrepreneurship development, right? Depends on market access and marketability of the products, right? So unless that gets established, right, for these poor and for the women, it's not easy, right? So therefore, taking on market by the poor and women is not easy, right? That is the vagaries of market, including competition. So that would be overwhelming for these kinds of micro entrepreneurs, right? And the state vagaries, of course, including, as I said, the kind of budget allocation, right, which goes on at a discretionary way, right? Not assured, not sure, right? So all those things does not help. So therefore, there is more of spontaneity in terms of achievements and performance than any kind of a systematic kind of effort and systematic kind of results, right? So that is the systemic level challenges programmatically, right? Yeah, so they go with many challenges, right? Though, as I said, that they have a lot of improvements. For example, if you see past programs and the current programs, most of them are all termed as mission program. Like NRLM is also mission, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is also mission, right? So, right, variety of mission mode programs, right? But do they really work in mission mode, right? Mission mode with all the zeal and with all the zest energy on the part of the implementing agencies, right? Though they go with the names, right? Though some changes are there, but they largely work in budget mode, not in mission mode, right? So that is what I was talking of, the vagaries of state, vagaries of market and vagaries of state, right? And in terms of design, right, actual implementation, so there is also a lot of problems, right? Apart from the leakage and corruption, which we are also trying to plug in, including, of course, all the ICT and other kinds of methods. But that is not easy, right? So therefore, in terms of implementation, right? So dependence on budget, leakage and corruption, and also, right, absence of, right, professional kind of inputs, because for any program economically, if it has to work successfully, it requires more systematic professional inputs, right? So many of these programs, though they are called mission mode programs, professionalism is supposed to come in, right? More systematic effort is supposed to come in, but they continue to depend on bureaucracy, right? So which is more concerned with meeting targets, right, rather than making real impact, rather than making real difference. So that is the problem programmatically I identify. That is the case with whether it is MG Nareka, which is also concerned with promoting employment, unskilled kind of employment. It has never reached its potential, right? If you see the official record, it's only less than half, right? 45 days per family, right? Which means per individual, it will be hardly 10 days. Even if you take 4 members, hardly 10 days of employment, and that too only for in some limited pockets and limited districts, right? Then again, of course, so we have seen many other kinds of program, right? We, of course, had this SGSY, right, which was the predecessor of the NRLM, right? So in fact, SGSY had made some kind of a difference as compared to past. In the sense, it started with the groups, it focused on women. It also said that, right, we need to focus on for large scale and viable livelihood generation cluster-based project methods, right? Organize things in a cluster, bring in viability, bring in scale. So that's how possibly viable employment schemes or entrepreneurship can be promoted, right? But if you actually look at this cluster-based methods, it never took off under SGSY. Of course, I had studied SGSY also. Of course, I had also studied that previous predecessor of SGSY, that was IRDP. So all of them, despite many improvements and changes, seems to be working in the same way, right? As things changes, things remain same like that. And then now, of course, we are also emphasizing a lot of skill development, DDU, GKY, right? it started with ambitious goal, but even the goals have been reduced, right? Of course, though it had a bigger kind of a goal, but actually they have now given a realistic goal of right by 2023, I think 2.7 million to be trained and placed, right? But in the first 6 years of working, it had generated employment for only 23%, right? The reverse of it. It says at least 75% should be placed, but actual what has happened is the reverse, right? Right. So that is the kind of outreach or the impact, and more so for women. This proportion is even lower for women, right? And in fact, incidentally, even SGSY had similar kind of impact. SGSY assessment had shown that less than 1/4 of the SHGs were able to take up any kind of entrepreneurial activities. That was the assessment of SGSY before NRLM came in. And now, of course, we have NRLM. It's now the flagship program. It's being called as livelihood program, livelihood mission. It's supposed to work with the goal of saturation, right? Saturation principle. That means once for all, everyone to be brought into the fold, and poverty, unemployment, and such things to be done away with this kind of a strategy, with mission mode, right? Right, but how is NRLM working? Right, no doubt outreach is highly impressive. It's a target, and it's even some of the strategies that it has proposed. It's highly interesting and impressive, right? Right. So that is what I want to share before so what are the of NRLM, which we all know? Yes, it's a kind of a multi-pronged strategy, or a multi-dimensional program emphasizing on self-employment, wage employment, and also ensuring variety of entitlements through convergences. First kind of a difference as compared to, let us say, SGSY, which had only self-employment, or IRDP, which had only self-employment. So NRLM is trying to say that no, we have to protect livelihood, we have to promote livelihood. So it has to be a multi-pronged approach. Yeah, which is in some sense a kind of a positive, or a new kind of an approach, right? Which can possibly help the households much better than simple self-employment, individual-based self-employment program. Then the second difference is, of course, collectives, right? IRDP and SGSY partly also work based on individuals, right? So everything to be handled at individual level, right? So then the assessment showed that no, that is not particularly for the poor. Individual oriented approach is not helpful, because they already are weak, they lack bargaining strengths. So if you also want them to work in that way, it's not going to help. So let us bring them together under collectives, so that certain bargaining strengths and strengths of collectives, right? So therefore form collectives from SHGs to federations to and other kinds of groups, right? So more so for women, right? So therefore NRLM now almost has switched over to a totally women-oriented program. That is a kind of a major kind of a shift, right, from IRDP to NRLM. And third thing, right? So livelihood generation, livelihood promotion, right? It does not happen on its own, right? Just by farming some SHGs, right? Just by giving loan, which we had all seen under IRDP and such schemes, does not happen. What is required is professional structures, professionals who know what is probably employment generation, who know what is marketing, who know what is project implementation, right? Particularly for this kind of people, so that their livelihoods can be promoted. So therefore bring in these dedicated professionals, right? So incidentally, so at least the last 2 years, right? So is exactly what AMUL has been doing here. Collectives with professional approach, trying to promote livelihoods, particularly in the domain of dairy development, right? So therefore NRLM in a sense is trying to replicate what AMUL has done for sustained employment and income generation. Yes, which is good, This strategy was missing, and now NRLM says we are going to do this, right? Yeah. So, but what are the outcomes, right? As I said that we did a major assessment of NRLM, All India assessment for the MORD, right? And I have also worked further in terms of a paper and all. So that anyway, that major research evaluation project is available on the MORD website. You can access, right? But my main conclusion is that despite these improvements, innovations, right, NRLM still has a long way to go, and it has not succeeded in breaking new grounds towards women employment and entrepreneurship development, right, despite some innovative effort. That is my assessment of NRLM, which comes out from that larger study, right? So my own paper, right, which draws from the household survey also we had conducted. So NRLM was an all India study, household study we had done in 3 states, right, for Jharkhand, MP and Maharashtra, covering about 4,300 randomly selected households, consisting of about 2,100 control and about 2,200 treatment households, right? So that is how we had done the impact studies, and I'm going to just share some of the impact or some of the results focusing on employment and such issues, right? Yeah, so this is the coverage and outreach. So we know variety of collectives are being formed, right, from SHGs to VO level organizations, cluster level federations, and also specialized organizations like producer groups, right? And of course, as I already mentioned, right, the outreach is even now bigger. This was an earlier assessment. The outreach has increased, but the proportion of women, right, that is what to be taken note of, right? It's almost entirely consisting of composed of women, all these SHGs and collectives. That's a positive feature in terms of, right, giving women some kind of a space economically and socially. Yeah, so what are these organizations doing, right? So we did a survey of, as a part of that survey, of about 268 village level organizations, right? The first level federations, right? Yeah, so one thing that comes out is primarily they're all into savings and credit, though they are doing variety of other activities, right? We have listed, this is more of a listing. But if you actually go into many of these activities, they are all very thinly spread, right? They are sporadic. They have reported, we have included, therefore it looks like that. But primarily, they are into microfinancing, right? That is their prominent activity, which they are doing more widely and in an involved way. Other things, they are all reporting because they are being asked to do some of the other activity, right? So they are getting into it. Like livelihood promotion. Yeah, so all VOs are doing some or the other. So we are trying to do this, we are trying to link that, etc. One SHG here, one SHG there. So they have reported. So therefore, nearly 45% of VOs are involved in livelihood promotion. But in actually, that's as I said, is a very, very thinly spread, right? So just a kind of a skeleton kind of a livelihood kind of a effort that is going on, which is not going to help in a significant way, as our results are going to show. But ideally, yeah, therefore, these VOs or these CBOs should be, right, right, should be scaling up, or rather, right, what I should say, intensify the all other activities, right, apart from their microfinance activity, right? So intensify or deepen or right, widen those kinds of activity, so that right, the impact which requires, as I said, more professional effort, more systematic effort can be done, right? Right, then moving forward, right? Yeah, so what was the all India level access, right? This is of course all India level figure, right? So on an average, an SHG was getting about 1.65 lakh fund, right, capital, right, which they would again distribute among themselves. In many cases, they would distribute equally, right? Even in Andhra, the common practice is that they would divide this amount equally. Members, 16,050 rupees would be the clearly divide, even in Andhra and Telangana, right? So that does not help, right, in terms of actual need, etc. But every woman wants to have some access, so they are doing it in that way, but that is not matching, right? So I must tell one thing, right? So therefore, right, during COVID, in order to, again, because we all saw what happened during COVID in terms of employment, etc., right? The government said all these SHGs can get up to 20 lakh. Government announced that this limit, credit limit, which they are getting would go to 20 lakh. Yes, in terms of, again, for entrepreneurship development, etc., that is needed. But whether in reality that would happen, whether bankers forward to scale up this infusion, capital infusion, right, is again questionable, right? Of course, one need to see. I'm trying to see what has happened to that 20 lakh scheme. My own studies in some of the villages says that has not worked. SHGs continue to work in the way they were working even before COVID, despite the new scheme. Okay, right. Now, where is that going, right? Where is that going, right? So this is the classification of the use of, or rather classification of the loans that the SHG members have obtained, these NRLM SHG members have obtained for different purposes, right? Control and treatment, if you see, right? So the broad categorization A and B. So it's very clear, right? Bulk of it is towards consumption and non-production kind of activities. Nearly, right? Even in the treatment, nearly 60% is towards a variety of consumption and production activity, non-production activities, and only about 38% or less than 40% is towards production activity, which again is which they are already doing. Agriculture, right? Only in the case of livestock, some improvements are there, some incremental activities are there. But otherwise, these are all activities that they have already got, and they are therefore investing, right? Women would borrow and give it to their husband or give it to their family. It is that kind of a thing. So incremental additional is only limited, and particularly in the livestock sector, which I will show, right? Because, right. So what is the impact on diversification, right? Of course, going by this ratio of 60-40 ratio, we cannot expect very significant kind of employment generation. So significant kind of diversification and significant kind of employment generation or entrepreneurship development. That is not possible, right? But whatever that has happened, right? So we identified two areas. One is the livestock, right? So livestock is one area, because that is one area women tend to take up, right? Activity, because that is relatively easier, and also kind of an area where they have some kind of a skill and understanding, right? So that is where some difference we are seeing, right? So SHGs, women or households, they are slightly now better off in terms of their livestock holding, dairying, right? If not poultry, right? Yeah. So there is some impact on the livelihood activity, right? But as I said that, yes, but not very significant that this could make again a major kind of an impact, right? There is difference, but not very dramatic or a radically different kind of a result, right? Those statistically significant. That's important, right? Okay, and coming to non-farm enterprises, right? So again, what we saw, literally there is no difference, right? Of course, there is some difference. SHGs have made some difference, right? In the sense that the women or the households at least have been able to come on par with other people, right? If 4% of the people are into non-farm enterprises, so therefore these people are also able to reach that level, because through some bit of loan and other things, so they have been able to post NRLM, take up some activity, right? Take up some non-farm activity in a very limited way, right? But that is not helping them to helping some 25% or some 50% of them to pursue non-farm activities. No, hardly. Overall, it is less than 5%, and that partly has been helped by this loan, right? So that is the kind of impact that it can have. That is what I said. It's an incremental, right? An incremental kind of an impact, marginal kind of an impact, right? So at the most, it would come there, right? Where other members also, where of course non-farm activities, right? It's not that easy for poor households to pursue, but whatever limited non-farm activity that they are pursuing, to an extent there is some impact of SHGs, right? But not very dramatic, not very dramatic. And when it comes to again RCT, which is entrepreneurship development training, where they would obtain entrepreneurship development training and pursue some kind of an entrepreneurial activity, right? Yeah. So that is yeah. Sorry, there is some typo error. That's also very small percentage, right? It's not 72. It's less than 2% have been able to obtain some kind of a RCT training, right? RCT training, right? Yeah. So this is what is some the kind of result in terms of diversification and employment generation. Now, of course, if you see actually the employment of these work and employment of these SHG women, right? Yeah, SHG women, right? Yeah, so it largely remains the same, but some difference can be seen, right? As I said, which is because of some marginal impact that has happened in the case of right animal husbandry, and also very marginally in terms of enterprise activity. But also, of course, agricultural labor work is much higher for these women, right? Of course, household work is significant. That is the major thing. That is the major constraint, right? In terms of gender issues, right? So household work remains their primary work, right? As you can see, right? Though we say that they are not participating in work, etc. Right? That is, of course, in terms of wage work, etc. But women do toil, right? They do a hell lot of work, right? And household work itself is a major work. So just by saying that it is work participation rate is 16% or 17%, right? That does not mean that women don't work. They work, right? They work mainly in terms of the household work, right? And that becomes the constraint in terms of participation in other activities. And if there are no, therefore, attractive, decent, viable kind of activities, so they would continue to be there in their agricultural labor, right, and in household work, right? So therefore, even the salaried jobs, as you can see, not much of a significant difference, right? If DDU GKY, because that is also supposed to be targeted, right? Even here, that is less for them, right? So therefore, the impact of DDU JKY for even for NRLM households, right? Because the children or their daughters are also supposed to be targeted, right? But that does not seem to be happening. Of course, this is directly for the SHG members. This is direct. This thing. Though I have data for other household members, etc., but I am showing here only the SHG women. Before now, I come to my the next part, right? So therefore, I would now say in terms of NRLM, right? It has remained largely minimalist, focused on microfinance, right? Which has its own kind of a limitation given other constraints for the poorer households and especially the women, right? Though some positive impact is there in particularly like in livestock and marginally in non-farm, but the extent of diversification and employment generation remains limited and constrained, more so because it works on an individual basis, right? So because every individual has to make effort. These SHG collectives are there. Those collectives are working mainly for mobilizing women towards SHG formation and for microfinancing. But they are not helping in terms of livelihood generation, right? Or they are not even themselves, though they are giving some support, as I showed, some limited support or sporadic support, but not in a significant way. So therefore, they have remained largely as a microfinance kind of collectives, right? Rather than livelihood promotion or employment generation collectives, right? Yeah. So that is the issue. So therefore, this individual approach, right? Right, leaving individuals to the vagaries of market and on their own, right, borrowing and then trying to promote their own kind of livelihood with some bit of a support, that's going to help some, if not all, right? Only those who probably are smart, who have some entrepreneurial abilities, some skill on their own, they're able to, right, in this kind of individualized effort. But bulk of them would use their no loan and such capital that comes from microfinance or even NRLM institution towards their social and non-production activities, because that is also a major compulsion for them, right? Yeah. So therefore, given this, right? Yeah. So I suggest that yes, we need to also look beyond these individual efforts. So what does that mean, right? Yeah, so we need to, of course, we have promoted collectives, but as I said, they are not really livelihood collectives, right? So we need to possibly work towards converting them or even promoting more and more of livelihood collectives, right? So, of course, a bit about collectives before I also share a couple of examples and conclude, right? Yeah, so of course, collectives, in some way, collectives, cooperatives, whatever may be their legal form, right, are a higher order kind of an institution, right? So, right, they require not only higher kind of involvement, but also higher level of principles have to come in. That's a challenge, right? Of course, typically for neoclassical economists, right? So they have a lot of objections for cooperatives, right? So because they bring in other dimensions which they don't like, right? But collectives have been supported and have been thrived both in the capitalist system and the socialist system, right? And also, of course, scholars on both the spectrum have supported collectives, right? So even some of the no, liberals, even in the capitalist system, support collectives, right? Like one act collectives, right? One act cooperatives are one such form, right? The extreme form of efficient cooperatives in the capitalist system, right? Yeah, so that is the theoretical kind of a support that is there, right? So with clear autonomy and enablement, collectives can perform, right? Though, of course, they have shown mixed performance so far, less than the potential, but with proper autonomy. That is the lesson that has come out, right? Collectives were in many ways were manipulated or were not allowed to come up, right? But wherever systematic effort have been made, right, with considerable autonomy and considerable enablement, right, even in a market-based system, right, so they have shown performance, right? They have right succeeded. They have sustained themselves in generating considerable employment and considerable livelihood for their members, right? Yeah, so these are some of the strengths of the collectives, right? Why we want collectives vis-a-vis individual effort, particularly for the poor and women, right? These are the conventional strengths of collectives, right? So they help build scale and efficiency, which is important. Individual, it is not easy. They cannot also fight in compete in market, right? Their bargaining strengths are weak, right? But collectives bring them. Of course, collectives also ensure ownership, control, and democratic working, right? Which also is a kind of a positive feature in terms of empowerment, right? And for women, right? So they can, of course, unlike market-based institutions, which are very rigid, but cooperatives can tune their working to the needs of women, right? Some of the examples I'm going to share, they have tuned their working to the needs of women, right? That is the advantage that cooperatives would give even for women, right? As I said, by improving their bargaining strengths or overcoming their vulnerabilities, right? Yeah, but they would need good catalyzing effort, linkages, and support of professionals, which is important, right? And particularly to work in the market, to compete in the market, because in a situation of jobless market, jobless growth, we need to promote them so that they take advantage of this growing market, right? Growing demand, variety of such things that are now being encouraged, startup and many things, right? So we can have startups and such things even for these women collectives, right? Yeah, so many of the SRLMs are doing this right now. They are trying to move themselves or go into livelihoods. Till now, they were into mobilization and maybe microfinancing. Right? So these examples for collectives, right, or rather also justification, which we all know. I don't have to, because many of us know this, or rather all of us who are working in the area of development, we all know some of these examples. Right, one is the legit purpose, right? So that small collective which has also grown into a big collective of now over 45,000 women, right? And focused on employment only. They have even sacrificed mechanization to sustain the employment, right? A market-based organization would go for mechanization to reduce cost, right? But Lijat Papad, they have remained, right? They have remained labor intensive just to give employment to the women, right? And they have overcome the market competition by being labor intensive only, right? Yeah, so those kinds of things are possible even in collectives, right? Yeah, so that is one example. They also have highly integrated with market, with professional approach and self-reliance. Then, of course, second, closer home, right? This Vasudhara dairy, right? It was initially a dairy, of course, in the tribal area of men, but it failed. The men's cooperative failed. Then the team, right, led by Vashi and all, they decided that no, we will convert this into a women cooperative, right? So they started mobilizing women. So this Vasudhara dairy is now prominently a women dairy cooperative, right? Working very successfully and ensuring considerable kind of income and employment generation. Studies have shown that the kind of income and employment generation is much higher than the average rural household earning with livestock, right? Right. So it's a kind of a proactive, this dairy example, particularly in the Adivasi area, right? It's a kind of a proactive dairy formation involving women, right? As members, as leaders and managers, right? With clear links given through SHGs, training, livestock development, and marketing, right? So that is the livelihood approach. That is actually is what is livelihood promotion or livelihood approach, which these cooperative dairies, Amul and all have done. Vasudhara dairy also has done this, right? Yeah. So incidentally, women, right? How did this turn out? There used to be, if you go and talk to collect these primary dairies, I've also visited these primary dairies. Many of them earlier were actually under losses or suffering problems because of corruption and such things. Bringing in women has almost eliminated corruption and brought in efficiency and good governance there. And that is one of the reasons also for this turnover and sustained effort of Vasudhara dairy, right? And then third, of course, is the Kudumbashri, which is also some kind of a livelihood program, which was there much before NRLM also, right? They are also now consistently trying to promote collectives, right? So they have promoted over 17,000 collectives for livelihoods. There are a good number of them which are working well, right? And at least two of them which have been highlighted, which have also been studied, right? One is the Nutrimix unit, which has a link with the ICDS scheme, right? And therefore, there is a kind of an assured market that has been given to them in terms of producing nutritious food for the children, right? So that is their major kind of a linkage that Kudumbashri has enabled. And these Nutrimix units are working fairly successfully, right? In terms of good amount of turnover, right? Monthly turnover itself is 42 crore 2 years back, right? And also their group farming, right? Women taking land on lease is another thing, right? Bina Agrawal has documented this, has researched on this, and she also shows there is considerable difference of these groups even compared to the other individual farmers, right? So that is another kind of a positive effort involving collectives for livelihood generation. Of course, again, even much closer home, the Rudy a company of Seva, right? Of course, they also have many collectives, right? Rudy company, or even the Hansiba, right? Group, all of them also work on collectives. Rudy is also very interesting. It is also working in Anand. I have visited them. I keep visiting. Very interesting, both backward and forward kind of a linkage where farmers are able to get assured prices, market prices. And on the market side, sales side, they've employed nearly more than 3,000 women who are actually are the marketeers, right? Marketeers in more so in rural areas, right? Of quality products, right? Quality seeds and the quality kind of input and extension for the farmers, and also quality and affordable grains and food for the consumers, right? So it's also an interesting thing, and it's growing and worth studying and also possibly replicating. Yeah. So with these are some of the, of course, I can go on giving examples, many examples, but I'll just end here. I'll conclude by saying that yes, there is enormous challenge, right, socially and economically for employment generation of women, entrepreneurship development. I mean, of course, as I said, entrepreneurship development is in terms of livelihood development and micro entrepreneurship development, right? Minimalist approaches, individualized approaches can go only to certain extent. They will be incremental, right? Largely incremental, and they will not make much of a whatever kind of an innovation you may do, right? Unless there is an integrated approach, unless we also complement and supplement with collectivist approach, right? Otherwise, because market has now complete sway. Market agencies are entering every field. They will not leave any field. Every field they will enter. And market agencies are entering every field. In terms of women's employment, right? This Ministry of Cooperation can catalyze such collectives, and it will be a win-win situation both for these women and for our society. That's all I wanted to say. So sorry for probably taking more time. I don't know. I have taken more time than, because we are all teachers. At IRMA, we are given 90 minutes. So therefore, I was still trying to go fast and all, because in class we have a lot of discussion, etc. in the middle. But since it's a different kind of a thing, I thought I'll complete. Right. Sorry, I did not give anyone any opportunity in between. But anyone has any point to share, anything, countering, arguing, welcome. As I said, it is engagement. We all should learn. We all should share these kind of things, think and explore, right? So therefore, at the 75th year, where we stand, many challenges still to be addressed, right? Many challenges to be unaddressed, remain unaddressed, and possibly one way is first is to, yes, debate, discuss, and identify way forward. Yeah, thank you all. I am done. In case anyone has any comments and questions,
Thank you so much, Dr. Professor Shylendra. I think it was a very comprehensive lecture that you have given, and I think a lot of insights you have shared with us. And I think we all are very concerned, and we are also an engaging topic for all the researchers as to why the women's participation, especially rural women's participation, is declining, and possibly the increasing mechanization in agriculture may be one of the reasons, rather than the voluntary withdrawal from the labor market. But I think it's very well researched also, and a lot of extant literature tells us that stable work for women can only be ensured by certain policy prescriptions and interventions where non-farm job opportunities at the local women are created to divert the women workers from unpaid family work, as you have very lightly mentioned, that women's burden of housework is and their domestic work is so high, yet they are considered to be not really part of the economically active workforce. So obviously there is a need for women-centric programs, enhancement of entrepreneurship, upgradation of skills, training activities, as well as a lot of availability of credit for micro enterprises. And the policy has to focus on investments and provision of services for training women, for creating jobs and collectivizing the women in the rural India. And also I think another aspect that I would like to mention is that diversification of livelihoods from agriculture and into more paid, more productive activities can happen only if there is coordinated and concerted action for rural industrialization also. And in that capacity, I think women also have to be trained and skilled and told to be educate themselves and move on to low paying farm sector, because that is where most of them are languishing in. And I think their empowerment and more participation in collective activities can also have an impact on effects on certain social aspects such as early marriage, fertility, human capital investments, etc. So I think you have covered all these aspects very well. And whenever we are doing any research and we are working on women's employment and labor markets, what we are always hinting at is that there has to be significant and very sincere policy involvement in the creation of employment opportunities. I think your exposition on the NRLM tells us that what is ailing such programs which are initiated in the mission mode but have not really been very successful due to certain lack of budgets and policy designs and etc. And we have also gone much beyond that and told us how collectives can actually empower women, and how even before these kind of policy efforts were initiated and were brought into the field, there are organically functioning organizations. We have mentioned Lijjat Papad and Kudum Shri initiatives, etc., how they are already been working and they're actually making an impact. So I think it is a very important lecture that you have given us. And I want to share with you that the past 2 lectures under this series have also been inadvertently related to cooperatives and the movement. And so this is something of a fresh perspective on how women's collective can spur entrepreneurship amongst them, employment generation in the face of very poor market opportunities for women, very few employment opportunities, as well as the kind of skills and education that the women are facing and the kind of involvement that they have in the home-based activities. I think it was a very important insights that you have given us, and your involvement in such long-term research and your current involvement in an ongoing work actually has given you as well that a lot of insight that you have shared with us, that what actually ails and how we should have to move forward. And I think your papers that will come out of these studies are going to be very important feed for design of policy and other programs that may or course correction in the program design. And also I think to that extent it was a very informative lecture, and so thank you so much. I think now I will invite the participants, if they would like to raise any queries or if they want to have any discussion, they may please raise their hand here, and they may go ahead. Or anybody from SPIESR, the researchers in SPIESR, I would prefer if they would want to involve themselves in any discussion. And also the Dr. Keshav Das is there. I can see Lalita is there. Madhu. Anil Kumar Roy. Hi.
Yeah.
Sir,
anyway, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for the nice NRLM session. Just one query: is there any part of the hesitance from the bank side to sanction loans, because these are very small, tick loan, not big ones? And second one is, what about is there the concern of SHG loans becoming NPA?
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No. That see, of course, in terms of promoting livelihoods, capital is an important issue, right? And access was not easy. So therefore, we started many of these schemes to give access only. IRDP also was that only, capital and subsidy. And then we have now worked with different combinations of capital and subsidy. And SHGs, right, came up as a kind of an innovation to augment capital flow for this segment, right? This sector, right? Yeah. So SHGs have worked to an extent. SHGs have their own strengths, right? But in terms of whatever experience that we have now so far, and I have also SHGs within this NRLM also, and also even outside, right? So they are at the most second best kind of an institution, right? They are not, in my understanding. Of course, I teach a course also on microfinance here, right? So how I see SHGs, right? Yeah, they are a collective. They are informal. Therefore, they bring in their own advantages, right? And particularly, they give an opportunity or a space for women, right? all those advantages that are there and peer pressure and such things, right? But they can go only to a certain extent. They can go to only to a certain extent. Ultimately, right? Yeah. So therefore, the SHG's own inherent limitation is one aspect. And at the same time, yeah, bankers' hesitancy, right? Bankers have that hesitancy that is there. Even forget about even just SHG women, or even for farmers like tenants, sharecroppers, landless workers, and all of them, right? Government and RBI very clearly says up to 1.6 lakh you can give without security, without collateral. But bankers are bankers, right? So they, for them, because they have to show certain targets, certain numbers, right? So they are they show that inclination, but inherently bankers have a reluctance. That is where the promoting agencies, right? Like for example, in Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, SHGs are able to, even in Kerala, are able to access good amount of credit, because these agencies enabled that these SHGs work credibly. They have that credibility, right? So that is what they ensured, right? So so therefore, in Andhra or in Telangana, the access is much higher. That's because the promoting agencies made these SHGs attain the required strength, right? Required quality, and hence able to continuously access. Though there also that amount is again limited, as I showed. Even in Andhra, they are getting only limited amount, maybe some 5 lakh, 6 lakh, and which they divide equally, and which there also they are using largely for social and other purposes. So therefore, for the bankers, SHGs on a long-term basis, right, are not a viable kind of an entities, right? So they would like to work with them only with a limited funds. Therefore, government announcing that all SHGs now post-COVID should get 20 lakh, in my own understanding, given the experience, was a very unrealistic kind of. I was participating in a seminar where the microfinance in charge of NABARD was also present. I was asking, please tell me how many SHGs have got this 20 lakh loan. I was asking her. So they also did not have this data. NABARD did not have their data. So therefore, SHGs have faced difficulty. They have faced dip. So the SHGs have faced difficulty, continue to face difficulty, but we need to use them, right? We can't, as I said, second best. So they have their own strength, at least for the first level kind of a protection, first level kind of a livelihood and other kind of an activity. They would be helpful, and we should continue with it. Dip wala. No, black nahi, doodh wala, dip wala. So that, and then build over with this kind of collectives, right? So where
So
the
can I
larger
just
kind
ask
of
one thing, that what is actually the difference between SHGs and collectives that you have been talking about? I mean, it's a collectives. By collectives, do we mean the producer organizations?
like for example, I will tell you, like you take the Vasudhara dairy example, right? I said that there is a linkage for SHG. See, these women they are members of SHG also, they are members of dairy cooperative also, right? These women get a loan for their livestock activity, maybe for to buy heifers, so for livestock development, for inputs, etc. So they are using that capital for their dairy development, right? But at a larger level, so they are linked to the dairy cooperative, which is collecting milk, which is processing, which is marketing, right? Right? So that is the linkage, right? So therefore, the SHGs are working at that very local micro level, enabling this access to capital, right? Capital, and so that these women can build their assets and capital base. And the collective, these collective enterprises like the dairy, right? Dairy union, that is doing the larger market operations of collection, processing, and marketing. Otherwise, if that dairy is not there, dairy collective is not there, larger dairy collective is not there, even these SHG activities and livestock development will also not happen, right? So that is the kind of a linkage. So therefore, SHGs are working very fairly successfully there, even in Vasudhara dairy. It's a combination of SHG collectives and the larger dairy collective. And that is what in many cases, even what Kudumbashree is also these days trying out. Right.
Dr. Madhu Bharti would like to speak, and then Dr. Keshav
Yeah.
Das.
Thank you very much, sir, for an interesting session and lot of insights about how this rural collectives in rural area are working. I just want to reflect a little bit on my own personal experience of working in rural areas. A few years back, I was doing some work in the rural areas of Sabarkantha, and we found that most of the schemes where women are expected to join the livelihood program is focusing on skill upgradation of tailoring, sewing, knitting, beauty parlor, etc., etc. And that is what is generally promoted. And every village can take only certain amount of such people. But while is like as coming from as a housing professional, we found that villages have a great demand for housing skill upgradation also, because the housing stock in all villages about 10 to 15% is rebuilt every year. But you find in rural areas there is extreme dearth of skilled manpower. You don't find a mason, you don't find a labor. In villages in Sabarkantha, they need to get a mason from Mehsana. He may have migrated from some other village from Dungarpur to Mehsana. But so I think maybe this kind of activities need to be kind of plugged into this livelihood mission, and especially about which are the activities which women can take up. I also believe that probably there is some strength in linking these women with the existing ITIs or such programs, where they also get a kind of a certificate, and then they are able to work in the market. You will see that in ITIs again there is a lot of emphasis on skills like AC repair, electrician for men, and for women it is again this kind of soft skills. Maybe women have that kind of inherent capacity where they are good in those things, but that those skills don't provide them jobs or a sufficient number of jobs. So that is one of my observations. My second observation is that whenever we are talking about an integrated program, we are only thinking of integrating the program in finance, integrating the program in other platforms, but we don't look at the need of integrating other support system for the women to go out from home and do some work. There, of course, there are these crutches and balwadis and all which function, but mostly they function for 2 to 3 hours every day, whereas a work day is about 7 to 8 hours minimum. So I think we need to put in some efforts there where we can kind of integration at that level is possible. Thank you.
Sir, you may stop your slideshow.
Yeah, right. I will just trying to see.
Or you just stop sharing, it will work.
Yeah, sorry?
You stop the sharing.
Okay. Stop sharing. Right. Yeah. So sometimes these things become tricky, because I'm actually normally I sit in my this thing, but today I came for another room, so there are little. Okay.
That's okay.
Anyway, yeah. So Dr. Madhu, I couldn't agree more with you, right?
Thank you.
Right. No, on these support things, of course, if you take, as I take Lijat Papad, the way they organize for these women even to come to work to collect their dough and other things, right? The support, right?
Yeah.
That's what I said. Possibly women collectives can work more flexibly to the needs of women, right? And many of these collectives have done that. Many of these collectives have done this, right? Otherwise, if you leave it to market based, they will not. Why they will not? Why they don't recruit women? Because otherwise they have to give all these additional facilities or all these additional support systems, which they don't like, which they think would be expensive, costly, etc. Right? Yeah. So if it is a women-based organization, right, automatically, so they need to consider this, right? So that is the
That is one no advantage. And anyway, irrespective of whether it is a collective or not, but those support systems need to be, when women are there in good number, needs to be taken into account. Of course, Seva is one I have been no, observing, studying them for long time. They try and ensure that. Right. Now coming to the first point, right, variety of other activities, right? There is a scope for other activities. Yeah. So that is where some of these professional approach to identify potential areas become important, right? Some of these these agencies have done, like for example, Seva in in Anand and Keda district. One thing that they did, right? There are a good number of those days, good number of bore wells everywhere. Bore wells always go fat. Someone has to repair them, and you call the department or PWD, they don't come, or no, there are always a problem. So what Seva did was they trained these SHG women in borewell and no such work, right? And they go from village to village. They go from village to village, right? Repairing, and people will call them and they collect some money and all like that. And then now many places, one more thing that has happened, even in urban and also in rural areas, construction groups or construction cooperatives have come up, right? That is a very good thing. Even in Andhra Pradesh, now women are being given even big machineries, these groups to run, take construction work on contract, big contract work, right? So they are being given even machineries, right? Like, mixer and various things. So construction work. And then even in the SBM, Swachh Bharat Mission, or even before Swachh Bharat Mission, when we had this total sanitation scheme, in southern states, again, collectives of women for construction of toilets and also supply of construction material for the toilets were being provided by these women collectives, right? And they were doing fairly well, because there is some kind of an assured linkage that was there. Yeah. So we need to be definitely exploring these alternative areas. That is what I said. If you leave it to individual women will not be able to do it. So therefore, collectives may have worked, may not have worked. Their results may be mixed, but they hold potential, right? Because we have learned, right? We, like in the past also, we have launched so many rockets, and our rockets have all fallen into Indian Ocean. Right? That does not mean that we don't launch rockets now. We have perfected that art now. So now collective art, we have learned from the mistake, right? So therefore we have to perfect that art, and where else it would be useful, right? When we are seeing this kind of a worrying trend of employment, entrepreneurship development, and post-COVID, it has also got worsened. And in my view, and being here in Anand, having seen Amul, right? And every day, daily, in some way or the other, right? I see great potential for collectives in all new areas. And therefore, I am not therefore thinking only in some conventional. I may have given some conventional examples, both conventional, traditional areas to be captured, right? That is what market is doing. Market is capturing even traditional areas, papad to pickle, to all software, to all technology based thing. They are trying to capture everything, right? So why don't NRLM, right, become like NDDB to promote livelihoods?
Yes.
Right? So livelihoods, and we train our graduates especially to work in those areas, right? The entire Operation Flood program, which was one of the world's largest rural development and collective based program, a significant role has been played by IRMA professionals, right, for the dairy farmers and livestock owners. Same thing we need to now replicate at a larger level under NRLM, right? All these dedicated structure that they have started, they're all temporary structures. Everyone is on a 2-year contract, 3-year contract. They don't want to get involved in this. These are all requiring a lot of involvement and long-term effort and investment. Therefore, I said they have become budget mode rather than mission mode.
So there is a Professor Keshav Das has left, but he has written that he was wondering about the role of business-centric infrastructure in BDS.
Business-centric, yeah, in BDS, yeah,
Yes.
BDS, yeah.
Business-centric infrastructure in BDS. So I think he has left because but
Yeah,
I think we
Keshav,
can
yeah, I know. Keshav is my friend. I know he works in the area of entrepreneurship development, small industries, etc. Right? BDS is also one area. Yeah, in fact, I wanted to also mention to Dr. Madhu the earlier point before I come to Dr. Keshav's point. See, all this issue of tailoring and many things which she rightly mentioned, and they work in unviable way. There is large number of people, etc. Right? See, under SGSY, when we switched over to the group-based thing, one of the novel idea that was identified, which is again a very positive thing, was that we will not therefore large scale promote same activities on individual basis. We will develop cluster-based activities, some kind of a clustering, some kind of a collective, so that there is some kind of a viability consideration, scale and viability, right? And that would help, right? So that would help, right? That again required some kind of a professional input, forming these clusters, forming these projects, etc. Right? So, but BDO or bureaucrats, they will not have time to get into those things. They will only meet the target and numbers, and they will say we have done with it. But cluster development, it never took off. Right? So therefore, so for them, it does not matter whether people will get into same tailoring or whether same other kind of a thing. What happens, they are not worried actually, right? So when we are now worried about employment and other things, these things necessarily have to happen, and then only we can diversify, right? Yeah, so that point I wanted to add to Dr. Madhu's. And of course, BDS, right, business development services, probably if that's what Dr. Keshav has mentioned, right? Yeah, so they are actually right in terms of entrepreneurship development, right? Particularly in the non-farm sector, right? BDS came up also along with micro entrepreneurship development, microfinance. Another area that was well known or more popular was this BDS, right? This BDS is actually nothing but an integrated approach, because all these livelihood activities, right, they also have to thrive as businesses, right? Like dairying also has to thrive as a business, right? Or even if it is a construction work, it also has to thrive as a business. It has to work in the market, go for bidding, take bidding, and have all the machinery and everything, right? But they need those business skills, business services, machinery, technology, everything, right? So therefore, this BDS was actually to complement and supplement this minimalist thing, right? We used to say in microfinance, not just credit or microcredit, credit plus we used to say. So that credit plus was credit plus linkages and BDS, right? Yeah, so that still remains. Like when I mentioned this Valsad, the dairy thing, it is integrated at various levels. For women, multiple things have been done by the dairy. In fact, Valsad, the union also has created a separate company to provide variety of these inputs, because the dairy there is a collective, larger collective, but they have also set up a company just to provide these kinds of technical support for women.
I think so. Even the FPOs, a lot of them are languishing and not performing well because the business development services and the plan that they have to, they are not equipped to actually develop a plan and carry out the proper business activity. So they require consultancies and expert advice on how to develop a model of business and what to produce and what to sell and things like that.
Yeah.
I think in that context, I think this is very relevant.
Yeah. No, you're also right. Of course, these FPOs which are coming up, right? But FPOs legally have their own strengths, fine, right? They give certain advantages like that. But in terms of the policy, which you were also highlighting, a lot of policy issues you highlighted in your comments, right? So in terms of the FPO policy, actually, if you look at that FPO policy, it is again a highly target-based policy, right? Which is again more focused on numbers, achieving certain numbers, than actually working with what FPOs actually need and how they can be made to work more viably, and what kind of linkages, what kind of services they need. That is not being focused upon. Everyone is every NGO or every promoting agency is interested in showing that we have promoted this many FPOs, that many FPOs. Though legally that is there, right? They don't have the restrictions like the cooperatives, but ultimately they are collective. They are subject to that logic of viability and scale.
True.
It is not the law that will help an organization.
No, and in fact, only after 3 years of support, they are expected to emerge as very successful business entities, which is also flawed design, I think.
Right.
Under the NABARD scheme of
law will go only to some extent, right? If law were to help all organizations, we could have brought in some wonderful laws for all organizations. Laws are not going to help. They will help only to a certain extent. So therefore, just because it is a new kind of a form, new kind of a company with new legal framework, that they will automatically work successfully. No, essentially they are collectives. They are, as I said, they are subject to the same logic as any collective. And therein comes all these things that you also mentioned, right? Yeah, so therefore, I am a little wary of this target-based kind of an approach that is being followed in regard to FPOs, right? And they will end up like earlier, variety of cooperatives which were also promoted on largely on a target-based thing, and they did not go far, right? And that might happen with many of the FPOs, though some here and there might come up. Like I know recently I was also there in Pratapgarh district where NDDB Dairy Services has promoted a dairy cooperative. Yeah, so those are all done with a very, very structured kind of linkages, efforts, etc. Right? In UP, Pratapgarh district, I was there recently for our student. Yeah. So and every village has that FPO, and there are certain standard operating procedures. Technology support is given, training is given, right? All these things are going on. But for many isolated micro level FPOs, they will be lost.
Totally.
They will be lost. Yeah, so that is the worry and concern with the FPOs. I share with your thoughts like that.
So just one thing you had mentioned in your program that the NRLM has not been successful in breaking new grounds for women employment and entrepreneurship, even though the outreach is quite high. So, I mean, this obviously indicates that there are major flaws in the entire design and implementation. So how can we redeem the situation, or how can the government, or is it thinking of some kind of course correction and sort of how entrepreneurship can be fostered more, suiting to the, as Madhu Bharti's question was also, suiting to the local requirements, economic of the rural economy, what it requires, how the women, what kind of jobs would they be most gainfully engaged in, and if self-employment, then what kind of activities. So is there some kind of thinking going on in which, because this is ultimately going to have a lot of impact on the livelihoods of women in rural areas, because jobs are very few and far between and very hard to come by, especially for unskilled and uneducated women who are largely engaged in the farm sector and who need to come out of the farm sector if they have to improve the livelihoods.
Right. Yeah. No, we have to be actually taking stock of this NRLM, right? As I said that I call it as a new generation program, right? At least in terms of its design, in terms of all these mixed strategies, mission mode, dedicate, several things, right? Several things are no doubt innovative. Their conceptual framework, right, that they have is also interesting, right? That famous diagram of NRLM is also interesting, right? But in actual working, so that diagram though looks good, but in reality there are enormous gaps, right? In fact, I also participated in NRLM evaluation. Of course, anyway, we have to do evaluation as part of our whatever our assignment, etc. task here, right? But I was more interested in understanding, therefore, how it has sort of evolved into a new generation program. Because I know as a student, I was studying IRDP for my PhD. Then subsequently I studied SGSY, and then therefore I was interested in. So now again we are going to conduct another major kind of a thing all over India. We're going to capture all the successful federations, document them again for a ministry, but through working through Pradhan, right? Pradhan has been nominated as the nodal thing, right? So we are going to do from IRMA side. I am going to coordinate that. So document all the some best working, good working CLFs, right? These cluster level federations, right? As to how they could because ministry also has instituted some awards for good performing federations and all like that. I was part of one of the technical committees of the Pradhan. Yeah, so we want to look at that, right? But at a larger level, right? So where I see the problem, where we need to take forward, right? Okay, so NRLM compared to IRDP and SGSY, one major difference is, as I said, outreach and the formation of these CBOs, collectives, right? SHGs, federations, VOs, etc. That is their achievement, no doubt, right? That is, as I said, they want to saturate, means literally they want to be there in every village, right? All the sections and all villages they want to saturate. So therefore, scale is impressive and enormous, right? And that is also a strength, right? That is also a strength, right? But going forward, particularly in terms of livelihood, which I was arguing, right? When Dr. Dave was asking me, sir, women entrepreneurship, etc., right? So immediately what came to my mind was my own study of our own study of NRLM and the gap that I had seen and the potential I was seeing for collectives and other things, right? Therefore, I thought that this was more for me to reflect so that I want to work further like that. But I see therefore the next thing, right, as you are rightly saying, right, NRLM, right, reaching this number and all is good, right? So therefore, I went to AP, Andhra Pradesh, right, and also Kerala, right? This thing, right? Two states where now, right? Two states. There was of course a film. Two states, right? Two states, right? Where at least NRLM or that kind of a livelihood effort is being taken forward, right? Is these two states, because they have realized that yes, we have been doing all these activities and it was largely kind of microfinance and such thing that will help, and that can go only to a certain extent. Unless we therefore go into promotion of this kind of a livelihoods, right? It's not possible, right? And that's where you require what we used to say, dedicated structure, right? So NRLM had this dedicated structure. So dedicated structure for what, right? Anyway, one first level was for promotion of these CBOs, right? Now that many of the CBOs themselves are doing promotion, SHG promotion, etc. But the dedicated structure was of the professionals who would bring in these projects and programs of livelihoods. They are there, right? So NDDB, right? Dr. Kurian said that it will not be there in Delhi, it will be here, and it will be focused only on dairy development. And only dairy development experts will be here, not bureaucrats, not any other people, right? He says, I don't want somebody who is in coal sector and he comes here. No, if they're coal expert, let them work, right? Dairy development, cooperative development required people who are dedicated, who will work, right? Whole in a whole log effort they will put in on a long-term basis, right? That is what is required. So that dedicated structure NRLM is saying, I see the parallel with NDDB, which was created as a dedicated structure for dairy cooperatives and which implemented own three-phase, one of the largest cooperative dairy development program in the world, and with the relative success. Of course, it also had its own problems, right? But the professional skills and professional effort that NDDB had put in, right? If Amul is now one of the largest food cooperative, or whatever we may say, right? Dairy cooperative, food cooperative, which has withstood all the competition, which has withstood several kinds of challenges at the political level, bureaucratic level, and at the level of competition and market. It was the sheer effort of these dedicated professionals, right? And that is how the large scale, right? Why companies appoint all these MPA, MBAs and pay such huge salaries, right? Just to sit in their AC rooms. No, they know that, right? Right? They only these professionals can do all this paid work, whatever spade work, etc. Right? So, right, Dr. Kurian realized that that spade work has to be done at the ground level and with professionals, right? And hence he also started IRMA, that yes, anyway, those IIM graduates or other graduates, they will go to the MNCs, but we need those same professionals here, right? So therefore NRLM has adopted some of the principles of Amul, as I mentioned, but it has to take that to the logical end, right? So it cannot work, as I said, on an annual budget to budget basis. It is working on that basis. I know I've interacted with we had interaction with all the major SRLMs, right? We conducted workshops, many workshops for all these SRLM people, right? They are all in that only. Every year they will fix target and budget will be approved, and they are not sure whether it is going to be approved for next year, etc. So how will they? What will they do? They are worried about their own livelihoods, right? So how will they think in terms of promoting livelihoods for other people unless that is assured, right? The dedicated structure, right? So having been here, having seen NDTV, having seen Amul, I understand what does the dedicated structure mean and dedicated effort means. So that is the way forward for NRLM in my view.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable time and your very patient listening to all our queries and your detailed discussion on that. And if anybody else, I can't see anybody else who would like to raise a question. In that case, Hansa, I think we can conclude.
Right, thank you. I must thank all of you for this opportunity, right?
Thank you so much.
I was keen to, of course, I am also in social science area, but to engage with social scientists, it was interesting for me because we are apparently rural. We are in a management school. We are also in a management school, right?
No, I think it was a very informative, and I think we needed to hear the management point of view also when we are talking about rural development initiatives and interventions for women's empowerment and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that is the strength of rural management, as what Dr. Kurian has advocated, right? Right. That's what I was being here. So I was trying to share. And of course, Dr. Alag knows he was also here, right? So we always used to debate, discuss these things. How is Dr. Alag doing?
He had a surgery.
Okay.
Yeah, so but I think he's doing well now, I heard.
Okay.
He's at home only, but he's.
Yes, but his column regularly comes in Express now and then.
Yeah. He's very prolific writer.
Yes.
That cannot stop writing.
Yeah. We had a nice time when he was here. We used to have good interaction. Yeah.
Hansa, would you like to propose a vote of thanks?
Forum will propose the vote of thanks. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm very thankful to Professor Shylendra. And after a lot of interaction and email, at the end of the day, we have a wonderful session, which provide a great insight regarding NRLM, specifically related to SHG and women empowerment. I would like to also, put some point that when you are talking about the collective efforts, I mean, in MP, they've started with this social audit. They are including this woman SHGs, and they've started with this social audit. Even in Dang, they've developed some of the cluster. In Maharashtra also, like some of the state which I visited, I found that. But of course, it's a very random clusters which was developed as far as collective efforts is concerned. And okay, I'm also thankful to Dr. Keshav Das and Dr. Madhu Fardi for raising wonderful questions, which help us to provide a greater insight from Dr. Shylendra. And I'm also thankful to Hansa Jain and Professor Neeti Mehta. I hope we'll have more from you in the future regarding the same topic or from a different point of view. Thank you.
Thanks all of you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.